Throughout August, we're commenting on this book by John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. And in it, he has much to say about Sabbath, rest, slowing down, and living differently. And we're looking at especially at his 12 recommendations as to how we can simplify our lives, how we become a Sabbath people. And I'm looking today at numbers 5 and 6, which say this: when you can, share and get into the habit of giving things away. So how do these two play out in my life? Well, I think both of these speak to an attitude of heart that says, what I own isn't really mine. It's been given to me by God, and I'm just the steward of it. I brought nothing into the world. I will take nothing out of the world. And I need to be generous with all that God has given me while I'm here on earth. And there's plenty in the scriptures that encourage this way of living and thinking. John the Baptist said, if you have 2 shirts, then share with the one who has none. Jesus said, give to everyone who asks you. And if anyone takes what belongs to you, do not ask for it back. And the description of the early church in Acts includes the saying, includes them having everything in common, selling property and possessions, and giving to everyone in need. But even though this attitude of generosity and holding on to things lightly is very much encouraged in Scripture, in my experience, lending and borrowing isn't always as easy as it sounds. Over the years, Rosie and I have been on the receiving end of extraordinary generosity, and we've also been able to lend to people in need. And both have their challenges. For example, what happens when you lend someone your tent and it's returned to you, but one of the poles is missing? Or you forget that you lent someone your tent, they forget to return it, and you're just about to go off camping, you're packing your car, you searched high and low in the garage and you can't find it. Or you borrow a car and you damage it. Or, this happened to me, you accidentally miss fuel putting petrol into a diesel engine. Who pays for that kind of damage? Or someone borrows your hedge trimmer just once too often, and you rather think the time has come for them to get their own. Suddenly, statements like, when you can, share, aren't quite as easy as they sound, because worse than the possible damage to the item lent is the possible damage to the relationship between you and the person that you lent or borrowed from. So lending and borrowing does have to be done well. And I'm going to make 2 suggestions to you if you're lending, and 2 suggestions for you if you're borrowing. So if you're lending, be clear on what you expect as you lend this item. Better an honest conversation before than an awkward conversation after. And this honest conversation will not only anticipate any possible complications, but it'll also make clear in your mind how you really feel about what you're lending. So, for example, if I'm lending my lawnmower, will I expect the person I'm lending to pay the repair bill if it goes wrong? Will they be okay with that? If I lend my car, will I put them on my insurance? Will I pay for that? Will they pay for that? You could even ask, with certain items that you're lending, could I bless this person by giving them what they want to borrow, and I'll get another one for myself? And if you're in a position to do that, then of course, that's an amazing blessing. But the point is that you think things through before you lend. Secondly, note down what you've lent and when you would like it back. Life is busy, and with the best will in the world, people do forget. Borrowed items can sit in a garage or on a bookshelf for years. I remember once going round to a person's house who I hadn't seen for a while. And as we sat down for coffee, I noticed in their bookshelf a book that I had once owned and I couldn't find anywhere. And I just said to him, I see you've got such and such a book. Is there any chance I could borrow it because it would be really useful for me this week. And he said, yes, of course. And he took it from the shelf and he gave it to me. And as I just gave it a quick flick through, I saw in the right hand, top of the inside cover, my name in my handwriting. And I realized that this was the book that I had lent him a few years ago, and both he and I had forgotten. So make a note of what you lend and to whom. And 2 suggestions if you're a borrower. 1, ask yourself if it's appropriate for you to borrow this item from this person. We all know different people to different degrees. Some people we know really well, and others we don't know so well. So before you ask to borrow anything, you need to weigh up, is it appropriate given your relationship with this person? How well do you know and trust one another? And what about the value of the item that you want to borrow? There's a big difference between borrowing a car and borrowing a book. And the question to ask is, if something goes wrong, will our relationship be able to resolve it and ultimately stand this? So ideally, wait until the item is offered rather than ask for it, and only ask if you really are confident that the person will be relaxed lending it to you. The second thing is look after it. Not necessarily as though it were your own, because if you're anything like me, there are some items you own that you're really quite casual about. But look after it because it's not your own, because it belongs to someone else. And they would like it back in good working order and preferably sooner rather than later. And unless you've clearly spoken about it, you must be prepared to cover the cost if something breaks or something goes wrong. Now, I recognize that even this can be tricky. Was it my fault that the lawnmower broke down the one time I used it? Or was it already pretty worn down because of the 50 times that you used it before you lent it to me? Again, will your relationship be able to cope with this kind of a conversation? Oh, and if you have borrowed, a thank you gift and card is always appreciated. So look after it so the 2 things, ask yourself if it's appropriate to borrow this item from this person and look after it. So in Acts, when it says all believers were together and had everything in common, I bet there were 1 or 2 tricky little situations that they had to work out along the way, and perhaps even a few more rules and restrictions in order to make this function well. But I think at the end of the day, when you can share and get into the habit of giving things away, because both these are attitudes of heart that helps us to hold on to things lightly and enables us to love and bless others. Because at the end of the day, people matter more than things. And if you're on the receiving end, be grateful, be careful, and be thoughtful. And of course, be prepared to lend what you can and give to others.